Merry Christmas and welcome to Barrels and Barbecue. Thank you so much for tuning in and hope you're having a great Christmas. Wanted to jump on here as we conclude our blind Advent whiskey calendar. Hopefully you've caught a few of our episodes as we've gone through the month here. If you're not familiar with that, we've gone through 24 different samples. My wife actually went through my collection of about 200 bottles and she poured 24 samples for me and then put together an answer key. Each day I took one of those samples that she numbered and poured it, guessed what I thought it was and kind of rated it, and didn't do as good as we thought we would. They were a lot harder than I ever imagined it to be, and if you've watched any of those, and if you've ever done this yourself, you probably recognize and realize that once you start tasting bourbons, they all kind of sort of blend together, and it's hard to sometimes pick out exactly what they are. But we were pretty close on a few of them, did get a handful of them correct. We're going to go through the rankings here in just a minute, but what I did was I took all the remaining samples from each day and poured it into this bottle here that we've collected and kind of made our own 24 sample blended bottle here. And so we're gonna pour this and give it a smell and sample it and see how it tastes. Pretty good color, if you can see there, pretty good darkness. We had, man, if you followed it all, we had bourbons, we had wheated whiskeys, we had a couple ryes in there, we had a couple American single malts in there, a couple different finished whiskeys. So we have a pretty wide variety here of samples. So let's go in for a little smell here on this Whiskmas day. Wow, actually it's fairly fruity. Has a really good fruit note on it. Almost a mixture of a cherry and grape smell. Has a lot of that kind of like jam or jelly smell. Definitely has a little bit of oak and some spice in there. But it's actually really pleasant, surprisingly. I thought this would be, and again, we'll try it here in just a second, and it may taste horrible, but it actually has a pretty good smell on it. It's not super strong alcohol burn. I think there's a few cask strength strong ones in there, but I think for the most part they're all in that 100 range. But okay, now you're getting a lot more of a peppery, almost like a dusty corn husk smell now, which doesn't sound appealing if you're listening, but there's still a little bit of that grapey, jam, cherry, but decent smell. Let's go in for a sip. Viscosity in the mouthfeel is really good, actually. Coat's really strong. Good oil. Interesting. Let's go in for one more sip before I give a thought on it. Okay, so it's really vanilla sweet and fruity right up front. Then that mid palate gets really dusty, earthy tasting. Almost like a peanut shell, but not quite peanut shell, but more of like that dusty, kind of earthy taste in the middle there. And then it rolls into that spice and peppery oak on the back end. And then as it lingers and kind of settles there, you get more of what I consider kind of that earthy note. It's hard to say. I almost like I get kind of that dirty, dusty corn husk, peanut shell kind of ending on it. If you have like a Jim Beam product, sometimes you get kind of that peanut shell. This is not quite that strong of peanut shell, but it definitely has that kind of earthiness on it. Honestly, it's way better than I imagined. And actually it's something, I think the mouthfeel and the sweetness up front makes this thing actually somewhat enjoyable. The mid palate and the finish is not, it's okay. It's a little bit, that earthiness is kind of rough on it. So let's go in for another sip here before we talk about the rankings. Okay. Yeah, the front taste, part of the mid palate is amazing. Great. And then it kind of gets that earthy kind of taste in the back end. Again, not terrible. There's enough sweetness on the back end that I think it kind of keeps it still decent and enjoyable. So, wow, there you go. 24 samples into one blended bottle. We'll let this sit and try it again here in a few months. But when I go through our rankings here, I'll throw the rankings on the screen here. You can kind of see, again, this is subjective. I get it as well. You know, I was only typically trying one bourbon. And these normally, all of these, for the most part, were my first drink of the night when I filmed it. And so it's hard to know exactly if these are accurate numbers on rating, but you can kind of see there the top of the list there. I didn't guess these. I was completely wrong on guessing Jack Daniel's Triple Mash and Jack Daniel's Bonded. And but I am a big Jack Daniel's fan, and so I think the flavor, even though I couldn't pick it out in the blind, the flavor and everything hit really, really strong. And so I'm not surprised that they did really well, because I really do enjoy pretty much all Jack Daniel's products. Surprising the Triple Mash and the Bonded were up that high. The biggest surprise for me was the Bloody Butcher Jeptha Creed. I remember when I first got that, it was, to me, okay, but I think it sat for months and opened up a little bit, and definitely was a pretty strong contender in the top there. And then Eagle Rare, again, is another bottle that I enjoy and love, and I can pick it out pretty easily with that kind of cherry cola. Again, that did there in the top 4. And then you kind of move into the Rebel single barrel wheated, a Lux Row 4 grain, then the Heaven Hill, and then that Yellowstone American single malt coming in at 7.9. Again, not surprising. It's one that I enjoy. I've always really liked that American single malt. It obviously did the best as far as American single malts. And then you kind of can see the 7s, you know, from 7.0 to 7.8 is kind of a very, you know, minimal difference between a lot of them. But you have there's actually a lot of wheated in here, which is surprising, because I typically, wheated is not always my go-to, but it did really well in a lot of these rankings here. That Maker's Mark Cask Strength, Knob Creek, Peerless, Holladay. The one I think is the most surprising, the one that's most surprising out of all of these that I thought I really loved, the John J Bowman Single Barrel. Again, I think it was one of my first or second ones I did. I'd like to see that one over again. I think it would probably do a lot better in the rankings. I really think that's probably, I honestly tell people all the time, it's way better than Blanton's. If you can find it, which is usually easier to find than Blanton's. I think it's a great bottle. It probably deserves higher than 7.0, but there's my list there. Again, kind of the bottom there, you can see just a regular old Buffalo Trace, same old Moses Double Barrel, Penelope Architect, and BALCONES American Single Malt. Again, you know, those are kind of fall to the bottom there. They're not usually my go-tos, the ones I don't enjoy all that much. They're unique and have some unique flavor profiles in them. It kind of depends on what I'm into that day. So there's the rankings. So again, thank you so much for tuning in and watching. We'll have more videos coming up here, but Merry Christmas and have a great rest of your day.